It's Labor Day, which means the summer movie season is officially over. And while there weren't as many movies this summer compared to the past years, due to last year's strikes pushing back most releases a year or two, there was still a decent number. So here are the 2024 summer movies that I saw, from worst to best. Your last place at number 19 is If. I know a lot of people really adored this film, and I can see why, but since one of the plot lines is about going through heart surgery, and me being a survivor of three of those, this was a movie that I found particularly triggering, and that's not a word that I use lightly. I thought this was just way too heavy for a family film. First off, the movie straight up opens with a montage of the main character's mom dying of cancer. Now, dead parent in a kid's film, okay, that's pretty typical. But as the film goes on, it gets more depressing because John Krasinski's character is spending a few days in the hospital praying for heart surgery. And like I said, I've gone through that three times and have had extended hospital stays, so I found this movie triggering. Because it's not just a minor plot point, it becomes pretty key to the third act. What threw me over the edge with this movie was when the main character's grandma gets a call that, oh, we need to go to the hospital, something's wrong with your dad, and the little girl has to watch her dad almost die. So, yeah, if you've ever had to watch a loved one die in the hospital, it can be pretty triggering. It was definitely a triggering movie for me. I think John Krasinski hates kids because this was definitely a movie that seems like it wants to make the kids cry. Personal triggers aside, though, the movie is still not very well thought out. For one, the rules of the movie are very unclear. For some reason, only the kid can see the imaginary friends, even though she's trying to find new kids for them. They never explain why she can see them and why nobody else can. Ryan Reynolds can usually bring up a bad movie, but he's not given anything interesting or funny to say or do. And this is just a straight up ripoff of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. The main imaginary friend is also being blue despite being purple. It's too heavy and boring for kids, and adults won't get anything out of it either. Number 18, The Union. Halle Berry, Mark Wahlberg, J.K. Simmons, for the kids like that, this seems like it would be fun. But unfortunately, this film is so dry and bland. It's a very specific audience for this film, men in their 40s and up. And I'm not part of that audience, so it was hard to relate to this movie. As far as the spy movie element goes, it's pretty forgettable and generic. Wahlberg and Barry don't have any chemistry, and they're not that entertaining to watch. Wahlberg's character is not that charming or likable. The humor in this movie feels very forced and awkward. J.K. Simmons gets a few chuckles every once in a while, but that's really it. This is just a bland, forgettable background noise movie. It's not worth your time, even if you are a fan of the actors. Number 17, Harold and the Purple Crayon. How did this get greenlit? Seriously, take a two-page book with no conflict, age up the child main character so he's an adult, and give him an existential crisis. Because that's what all great kids' movies need. And make the main character, who's a child, in a book written for the 3 to 5 year old crowd, a 40-something man child. So stupid. How is this the same director as Ice Age and Rio? I'm not going to act like those were masterpieces or anything, but they were at least decent. There's so many problems with this movie. For one, when Harold enters the real world, which happens about 5 minutes in, so there's pretty much no build up to this, he's a live action human. But his friends, the Moose and Porcupine, are also live action humans, which doesn't make sense. And the Porcupine character is in the movie so little that I keep forgetting she was a character. This is a movie that was written 20 years ago and is just now being made. Steals from movies like Elf and Enchanted, where the Manic Pixie Dream Boy or Dream Girl character enters an unfamiliar world, has an existential crisis, and wins the hearts of the skeptics and naysayers. Ironically, Zooey Deschanel is in this. It doesn't play a Manic Pixie Dream Girl character. It has all the 2000s kids movie cliches, and the humor is just not funny. There's a joke where a bunch of old men call Zooey Deschanel's phone number and start flirting with her. The villain is unhealthily obsessed with Zooey Deschanel, and he ends up being rewarded for his creepy behavior. For a movie that keeps talking about the power and creativity of imagination, there's nothing creative or imaginative here. This is absolutely one of the worst kids' movies I've ever seen. There's nothing of value here. I've seen better scripts written by a 5 year old in crayon. Save your family's time and money and skip this one. Number 16, Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. I haven't really watched any new SpongeBob in like 10 years. I only got the SpongeBob the Run movie from a few years ago so I could review it. I still like classic SpongeBob, but it seems that ever since the first movie, it's really gone downhill. One of my biggest complaints is why is this entire movie CGI? What happened to good old-fashioned 2D animation? In the second movie, the CGI parts made sense because they went from Bikini Bottom to the surface, so that was to differentiate it. But in the third movie and this one, it just seems odd. The CGI isn't even very good. It looks like graphics from a Nintendo GameCube game from the early 2000s. The plot is boring and uninteresting. The live action doesn't blend well at all with the CGI, unlike the first movie. The villain's motivations and plan are stupid, and I find it hypocritical that the film is portraying wanting to merchandise the SpongeBob characters as his evil plan, even though Nick has been doing the same thing for 25 years. In fact, this movie's very existence is an example of that. I can't remember any particularly funny jokes or moments or anything quotable. The Sandy Cheeks movie is scraping the bikini bottom of the barrel. Number 15, Borderlands. There's a line in this movie from Jack Black's character. I calculate our chances of survival at 0%. That never happens. That was my reaction to waking up the morning this came out, is seeing that at the time this movie had a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. As of making this video, it's gone up to 7%, which is still drastically bad. And to be honest, I can see why. I've never played the game, so my only exposure to this was the trailer for the movie, and I thought, this looks fun, I like the cast, I'll give this a shot. I like cheesy video game movies like Street Fighter or the 1995 Mortal Kombat, and what I got was not a complete disaster, but I wouldn't say this film was competently made either. What it does well is the aesthetic of the planet, and the action is pretty well done too. Unfortunately, the film is marred by paper-thin characters, jokes that fall flat, and a plot that just isn't that interesting. How thin are these characters? If you thought the line, "This is Katana, she's got my back" from Suicide Squad was the worst way to explain a character, that line looks well thought out by comparison to these characters. Literally, only 2 out of 5 characters have any sort of development or arc, are Kate Blanchett and Ariana Greenblatt. The rest of the characters are just there. And even then, Greenblatt, you can tell she's having fun in this movie, has a very paper-thin character. She's essentially the story's MacGuffin, but they also try really hard to give her a tragic backstory, while also making her part of the team, and I don't know, I don't think it worked. What's a huge, huge shame about this movie is this is a great cast. Kate Blanchett, Jack Black, and Kevin Hart are all great in other things, just not here. I haven't seen a Jack Black performance this unfunny since Shark Tale. Not a single line that came out of this character, who's supposed to be the comic relief, was even remotely funny. And considering this is being marketed as being similar to Suicide Squad or Guardians of the Galaxy, which are movies about a bunch of misfits that hate each other and come to love each other in the end, meanwhile smooth, witty banter, there's no witty banter. The villain is also very paper thin and just lousy. What a disaster this movie is. Some feedback from people who have played the game, they seem to really hate it. And I, who hasn't played the game, didn't find it all that entertaining either. It's a poor man's Suicide Squad. Number 14, the Garfield movie. I really wanted to like this one. It's the same director as Emperor's New Groove and has Chris Pratt, so I was really hoping this would at least be passable. Unfortunately, that same director also did Chicken Little, which is unfortunately what the film is for of Canada. The only praise I can give this film is the animation. The animation is expressive and takes advantage of cartoonish, exaggerated movements and facial expressions. Plot-wise and joke-wise, though, there's nothing new here, which doesn't even really have anything to do with Garfield. It feels like a run-of-the-mill talking animal movie that would have come out in the early 2000s if they slapped Garfield name on. There are barely any Garfieldisms in this film. Garfield is not cynical or sarcastic. There aren't many jokes about his weight. And all the amusing things Garfield does are essentially thrown aside. As much as I like Chris Pratt, as great as he was in Lego Movie and Mario, he doesn't try here. He doesn't sound like Garfield. He just sounds like himself. The film doesn't even feel like it takes influence from the comic or cartoon. I saw this with family, and the youngest kid in the group was around 10 years old, so she'd be the target demo for this, but she didn't like it either. Garfield may be fat, but the plot to the movie sure is thin. If you want to be some cat antics, you're better off spending 2 hours watching cat videos on YouTube. Number 13, Fly Me to the Moon. This is one of the most confusing movies I've seen this year. Usually, I was confused by the tone and what it was trying to go for. I like the 1960s aesthetic, and the film is very pretty to look at. The film also has an all-star cast, but unfortunately that cast was wasted by a lousy script. I'm not really sure what this film was trying to be. Satire? Drama? It was really confusing. It's not a true story, but it's also not really a satire, and it focuses an awful lot on marketing gimmicks, so I have no idea who the audience for this is supposed to be. If this was a true story about people working behind the scenes at NASA, or the film leaned more into this ridiculous idea that the moon landing may have been faked, it could have worked. I don't know. I just didn't get this movie. Perhaps Apple should get out of the movie business and stick to making overpriced electronics. Number 12, Descendants Rise of Red. The continuity errors of this are just baffling to me. It tries to connect itself to the 1997 Cinderella musical by bringing back the actors to play Cinderella and Charming, but that doesn't explain how a black woman and a Filipino man were able to have a white child, Chad Charming from the first three. The stepmother is also played by a different actress, which further calls into question the continuity. And also, we're supposed to believe that Cinderella and Charming met in high school, even though in the original movie that these actors are from, they don't meet until the ball, just like in the original story. And Ursula has a sister in this, but her name is not Morgana, like it was in Little Mermaid 2. And if you're going to connect all the Disney movies, at least keep continuity consistent. And this doesn't feel like it's doing that at all. I will say it is the best looking of the four movies. I can tell they gave this one the highest budget because it doesn't have that TV movie look. It looks like there was money put into this. But that's really the only good thing I have to say about it. The plot is basically just Alice through the looking glass, but they use time travel to try and stop Queen of Hearts from turning evil. And even though Uma comes back for a brief scene or two, they don't mention Harry Hook, which is odd, because Harry was super in love with her and loyal to her, and now he's just gone. And the object they use for time travel is a pocket watch. Now, in the show Miraculous Ladybug, there's a rabbit superhero that also has time travel powers who uses a pocket watch, and that's very clearly influenced from Alice in Wonderland, but here it feels like they stole it from Miraculous. And this really frustrates me because they do succeed in their mission. They make sure Queen of Hearts doesn't turn evil, but then they go back to the moment she attacked and set the plot into motion, and she's clearly not evil anymore. So why are the inhabitants of Wonderland not allowed to travel to Oregon? They explain they walled off Wonderland because Queen of Hearts is so crazy and dangerous, but since she's not crazy and dangerous anymore, why was Wonderland walled off in the first place? And why is Hades, the literal god of Greek hell, allowed on the island and not banished? Is Queen of Hearts really the most evil villain here? There's so many plot holes and continuity errors with this one. It feels cheap and lazy just a cash grab. Stick with the first three movies and skip this one. Number 11, Despicable Me 4. I'm someone who defends the Minions prequels and found them somewhat charming, so when I say that I didn't like this one, you know it wasn't good. The main issue is the Iron Man 2 or Secret Life of Pets 2 problem, where it feels like they had too many ideas that they wanted to do, and couldn't decide on one or two of them, so they decided to use all of them. There's a plot about the main villain who's very underdeveloped. There's a plot about turning the Minions into superheroes, which they already did, kind of with the mutated Minions plot, Despicable Me 2 and Rise of Gru. There's a plot about a hairstylist wanting to get revenge on Gru's wife. There's a plotline about Gru being forced to train a little girl to be a villain. And it jumps between these plotlines so quickly that it feels like episodes of a TV show they edited as a movie. The humor in this movie is either more of the same or it feels derivative of other movies. Gru has a baby now, and the antics and mischief the baby gets into feel ripped straight from Jack Jack in the Incredibles movies. There's a dated joke about the honey badger don't care meme. This movie feels like it's trying too hard to appeal to kids. And the villain's motivations in the story are so face-palmingly stupid. I thought, really? That's his backstory? That's his motivation? The other villains in the series were kind of interesting, but this villain is not interesting at all, and he's also only in the movie for the first 10 minutes or so, and then doesn't even really play that big a role until the last 20 minutes or so he's pretty underdeveloped anyway. Now, just because we're in the top 10, this doesn't mean these movies were good. We're still in the negative review side. Number 10 is Afraid. I find it ironic that this movie is about evil technology and it's distributed by Sony. There are some good elements to this movie, though. John Cho is great as one of the main characters. The voice of the evil AI does a good job of switching from friendly to creepy to evil. But as far as the writing goes, it's pretty generic. It doesn't present any new ideas about AI, and it feels at times like they're taking inspiration from movies like Megan, Avengers Age of Ultron, and that Disney Channel movie Smart House, and the show Black Mirror. Everything in this movie has already been done before and done much better. It does present both sides of the argument. It shows the advantages of the way AI can be used for good, but it also very heavily leads to the AI is bad message. The first two acts are decent. The third act is where it starts to fall apart. There's a plot line about a cult that worships AI that comes out of nowhere, and even some of the ideas with that, where the AI made people disappear, aren't resolved. Despite some of the horrible things AI does, the end tries to make the audience sympathetic to the evil AI, and it just doesn't work. If you saw the trailer and you thought it looked interesting, rent it on discount, otherwise, skip it. Number 9, Twisters. I have no nostalgia for the original Twister. The first time I watched it was just a few days before seeing this, and I thought the first Twister movie was just okay. Nothing special. And that's how I feel about this one. I do think it is slightly better than the original because it's more intense, and I think the characters in this one are better, but this wasn't a movie I loved. It does feel like it's trying a bit too hard to appeal to a new generation by having a younger cast, by having one of the main characters being an influencer obsessed with online clout. But this is pretty beat for beat the original, more like a remake rather than a true sequel. This wasn't really my type of movie. I like the disaster movies to be schlocky. These movies are just a bit too serious. Basically, if you like the original, you'll probably like this one, but if not, this one won't do much for you either. And now, here are the ones that I actually liked. Number 8, My Spy, The Eternal City. Now, the first My Spy I thought was just okay. It was pretty much the game plan, the pacifier, all these movies where the tough guy has to take care of a child and has his heart changed in the process. It was enjoyable, but safe. This one was a bit better. Dave Bautista is now the kid's guardian of the galaxy. Come on, I had to make that joke. Now, for the first half of this movie, it was very familiar because it is so similar to Spider-Man Far From Home. School trip to Italy where a villain attacks, there's world-ending stakes, the main kid has a plan to have to crush out Italy just like Peter. It's almost beat for beat Spider-Man Far From Home. And then the second half sort of becomes similar to the movie Taken. Plot-wise, it's very familiar and doesn't really do anything new with the spy game, but it is still very fun. It's silly, but it's silly in a fun way, not in a way that's face-palmingly incompetent. And the main villain is really good. I'm not going to spoil who plays the villain because it is a huge spoiler, but I have seen this person in other things, and I've never seen him play a villain before, and I was pleasantly surprised by how this person pulled it off. It's very typical spy movie stakes you've seen in a dozen other spy movies. If that's the kind of stuff you like, you'll most likely have fun with it. I certainly did. Number 7, Atlas. I don't know what movie other people watched, but I thought this one was decent. Not great, but decent. This is the same director as San Andreas and Rampage, and both of those are turn off your brain action flicks. It's the same. Granted, the film isn't really anything you haven't seen before. It even quotes iRobot. It knows exactly what it's doing when presenting its idiots about AI. I enjoyed the dynamic between Atlas and Smith. I thought Smith provided some good comic relief to the film, and the action in this film was pretty easily choreographed. If you're looking for a fun, turn off your brain popcorn flick, if you're a fan of, say, Alita Battle Angel, that's what you're going to get. If you're expecting something more thought provoking along the lines of the movie The Creator, that's where you'll be disappointed. Number 6, Ultraman Rising. Just for context, I had no idea what Ultraman was going into this. Apparently, this is based on an anime from the 60s. That's just to say, I have no nostalgia or basis for Ultraman. But even so, I really enjoyed this movie. I'm a sucker for kaiju movies, so this was right up my alley. The animation is great. It has that Brad Bird style, something you'd see in The Iron Giant or The Incredibles. The action is very reminiscent of Pacific Rim, so I really enjoyed that. The film also has a lot of heart to it with the father-son relationship and the relationship between the main character and the kaiju he adopts. My only criticism is that the villain is a bit underdeveloped. I don't think the film spent enough time with him to make the audience root against him enough. Other than that, it was excellent. This is a great family movie. Number 5, Inside Out 2. Since last time Pixar did a movie involving puberty was Turning Red, which I was not very kind on, I was extremely skeptical about this one. I find Turning Red gross and weird, and combine that with my opinion that Pixar hasn't had a good movie since Soul, I can understand why I was nervous. I am pleased to report that Inside Out 2 is a delightful return to form for Pixar, and manages to tackle the topic of puberty in a child-friendly way by simply saying that it's like when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, and it leaves it at that. It doesn't go into the birds and the bees discussion, which is what I was worried about. The sequel does what all good sequels do, where it expands on the ideas of the original. It introduces more complex and abstract ideas, such as one's belief system. The new emotions are also very cleverly written and designed, particularly envy, who is the shortest of all the emotions, and embarrassment, who is the largest. Embarrassment doesn't want to be noticed, but he's so big one can't help but notice him. There's envy, who's mad that she isn't as tall as the other emotions. There's a particularly fun scene where some of the emotions are in this vault of secrets. And one of Riley's secrets is that she still likes to show them to preschoolers, and the character is very clearly based on Bluey. It was a fun way to lovingly poke fun at older kids and adults who watch Bluey. There's a few different animation styles in this film, such as the Bluey parody character, but also a video game character Riley inspired that's animated like an 8-bit game, and the different styles blend very well. And it feels like Pixar has really surpassed the standard for animation, which is something I haven't been able to say for a while. And just rehash a few ideas from the first film, such as the running joke, the triple net gun jingle, and the main message is essentially the same as the first film, that it's okay to feel negative emotions, and you learn to deal with it in a healthy way. The first film, sadness was used as a scapegoat they had to learn to deal with, and here it's anxiety. So it definitely breathes some much needed fresh life into Pixar. While it's not as good as the first one due to some ideas being reused, I still say it's a worthy sequel and there isn't anything bad in it for kids, so go have a family movie night. Much like Pixar's earlier films, there's something for everyone. Number 4, Shrunk. Who knows what's hot among white women aged 18 to 30 right now? True crime, serial killer documentaries, and Taylor Swift. Let's get all those ideas into a movie and you've got Trapped. He said in the past he'd been influenced by Alfred Hitchcock, even going so far as to put himself in his movies as a cameo like Hitchcock would. Instead, he feels the most influenced by Hitchcock. As much like Psycho, we follow a serial killer and work into his psyche. Josh Hartnett is fantastic in the lead role as a serial killer, ranging from creepy to charming when he needs it, and the script is, for the most part, very smart. At times, it feels like the Hitman games, where the main character needs to get certain objects and great distractions to get away. And there's a scene where a character is figuring out that the main character is a serial killer, but instead of calling the cops, they instead go live on Instagram and doesn't even tell their followers the location. Things like that are a bit annoying. This film is nepotism at its finest, as Shyamalan's daughter plays the Taylor Swift type character. She does a good job, and I was interested to see what happened to her. This is one of Shyamalan's most thrilling and original movies, even if at times some of the plot doesn't make sense. It's worth seeing. Number three, Quiet Place Day One. This is a horror franchise has managed to remain consistent throughout all three of its movies. All three of them are very effective and intense, and they are proof that PG-13 horror can be scary. They don't even show that much blood or gore. Quiet Place Day One is another worthy entry in the franchise. This time we follow two new characters, and both of them are incredibly interesting. And what I appreciate about these movies is they have disability representation without making the character with a disability a crutch or a plot device. And it ticks me off when they do that, because it feels tacky and cheap. The first two, the little deaf girl ends up becoming Hiram in the end. And this one is a woman with cancer. Instead of having her be some character who needs to be saved by everybody, they make her independent and interesting. Despite having cancer, she still finds a way to appreciate the simple things in life. Her whole goal in this movie is to get pizza, and she doesn't care that she needs to survive against killer aliens. She is going to get that pizza, darn it. This is also a movie where the characters are actually smart. There weren't any scenes where I was thinking, really? That's one of the stupidest things you could have done. Why did you make that decision? And these two new characters are great. What makes this movie effective is after the first 15 minutes or so, when the whole movie is quiet, you never know if there's going to be a jump scare or if it's just going to be a scene for character development. So I was constantly on the edge waiting for a jump scare. And sometimes one didn't happen. And when they did happen, they're actually effective and don't feel cheap. I'm very hopeful we get Quiet Place 3, because this franchise keeps knocking it out of the park, and each movie feels more intense than the last. Number two, The Fall Guy. This is some of the most fun I've had in a movie this year. Not only is this movie fantastically directed, with a charismatic, witty cast and script, it's also got a lot of heart and passion put into it. It feels like a movie made by a director and not by committee. You can tell the director really has a passion for Hollywood, and especially the stuntmen. This is the same director as Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw movie, which is my personal favorite of the franchise. And while it's not as over the top with the silliness as that film, the stunts and action are still there. There's an actor in this movie who plays a stunt double for Ryan Gosling's character, and I won't spoil who it is, but as soon as they showed this actor, I immediately thought, that's actually perfect casting, because an actor does look a lot like Ryan Gosling, and I can't unsee that now. This is a great mystery with a lot of twists, had a ton of wit and humor, great action, a great love story, and a passion for Hollywood, filmmaking, and stunt people. If you're a cinema buff, it's a must see. And the best movie I saw of the summer 2024 season is Kingdom, the Planet of the Apes. While this one didn't have as much heart as the previous three prequels, particularly Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, it still expanded the world in compelling ways. The villain was one of the best in this franchise, and the new main character, while he's not as interesting as Caesar, still is well done. And the VFX for this movie are perfect and sets a new standard for film. This, along with Dune Part 2, are very likely going to be nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Oscars next year. This was directed by the same director as the Maze Runner films, particularly in the third act, because there are a lot of reminders of that style. And I think it worked. It's had a compelling mystery, great action, an interesting world, fantastic VFX, made me go bananas, and I can't wait for the next entry in the franchise. Let's go into ranking of the summer 2024 movies that you saw, and I'll see you next time.